Hey everybody, welcome back. Yankee and the Canuck show, episode 4 with the Canuck. We got 3 Yankees, 1 Canuck. You're Edward. You're you're our man
Uh,
tonight.
that's
So,
okay.
all
I'll be the
right,
odd guy out. That's fine.
everyone can identify the Canuck. That's Edward. Paul, a friend of ours from over on Orange Podcast Bad, is here. Hey Paul, how you doing tonight?
Good, top of the world, Ma.
And then we got Booker. Oh man, Booker, it's so good to talk to you. We always hang out. Used to hang out in your spaces. Interesting thing, the algorithm over on X all of a sudden started showing me your posts again, because I
Yeah, it's
haven't
weird.
seen them, for months. And all of a
Yeah, I know.
sudden, like the last 2 days, there you are.
It's been a weird week on X for me. My impressions are like they were a year or 2 years ago. They said this week was 6 million impressions, so it's back
Wow.
to the way it used to be.
Oh, well, so it is returning.
It
That's
seems
good.
like it. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
But thank you for having me.
all of a sudden I can see you again. So that's good. Right. So what Edward wanted to talk about was and this might go into multi parts, and we're glad to have you, Booker. Was basically Catholicism. Maybe we'll get to Islam or some other, but from a Christian perspective, and what our thoughts are, and what we observe, and what we see from that. And I don't know. Edward is. Do you want to jump in here and start with the?
Well, yeah, and we might do a little bit of over one here from before, but I was just saying earlier on how surprised I was on really where we find ourselves today in society with what's going on with, Catholicism and the Islamic movement. And of course, you guys are probably getting invaded just as much as we are up here with the Islamic faith and everything. If you want to call it a faith, and we pretty much know, as we talked about, where that's at. The Catholic movement, of course, I'm surprised, as I said earlier, how silent they've been on that whole thing. I mean, before, remember a few years ago, they wanted that big coexist thing, where we're just going to kind of all have this hodgepodge of all these religions getting together, and we're all going to be, singing kumbaya and be happy, I guess, dancing our way to heaven, apparently. But we just know that's just not going to happen, and that's not the way it goes. And I don't know how your feeling is or what your thoughts are on that, but because, well, as well as I do, the sacraments and everything that the Catholic religion stands on, more law than love, the same as the Islamic movement. It's all law and no love. So we pretty much know how that's going to end, and we talked about that before. So where we are today in this whole mess, not many, and especially the Pope, has not said a word about it. And it's been years since that coexisting was brought up, and how we're all supposed to be heading into that direction, but nothing so far. And where we find ourselves as a nation, ours and yours, I find the big movement that was supposed to be happening. Uh, I haven't seen it. Maybe you guys have down there. I don't know. We're supposed to have this huge I can't even think of the word now, where we're supposed to be getting more together and bigger and growing. I haven't seen any of that happen yet. Have any of you guys?
No, and to me that sounds like a political movement and not a religious movement.
Well, that you know how closely they are tied together. That's very true. But no, maybe Booker from down there. Have you seen or heard anything of this revival, this great revival that was supposed to be happening? That, well, I haven't really seen it yet.
Well, in Catholicism, I don't, but I think with the Catholic Church, you have something else going on right now. And I think that a lot of Catholics in America are unhappy with Pope Francis. They don't want Pope Francis. He's a New World Order guy, is what he is. He is, and if you read about him and the division that is sort of taken place, they would love for him to go because he is less of a theology guy and he's more about peace and love, and he's that type of person. And a lot of people in America in the Catholic Church, they do not want Pope Francis. He's a New World Order guy. He's a one world government is what he's for, and I think that's a problem for a lot of American Catholics, from what I hear and what I read.
Yeah, no, and you know what? Because he kind of brought out and I don't know, he was talking about marriage of gay priests, but he's accepting the homosexual movement, gay movement now.
Yeah.
That was always off the table for the longest time, and all of a sudden now he kind of almost backtracked and said, "Yep, you know what? That's acceptable now. We're going to allow it all in." And other things too that the Catholics are very upset about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think if you simplify it, Ed, you can say that, and I believe this is what he professes actually, is that he wants to be more of a pastor than, and he wants to bring all people into the fold, regardless of whether it's biblical or not. And I think that's where the traditional American Catholics, probably the same thing in Canada, are having an issue with Pope Francis.
Yeah, there's definitely in modern Catholicism they're grappling with reconciling faith with modern scientific and even intellectual developments, modernism and that kind of thing, which they're to understand the Bible in the light of historical and scientific research, as opposed to social constructs and challenges that they've had, and secularism and the changing roles of women, for example, and that kind of thing.
yeah. You know what? I think by the end of the day, it's going to be such a watered down version of what Christianity started out as. And I mean the original, you go back to the apostle days, to where we find the early Christians, to where we find ourselves now. It's not even close. I mean, it was a dangerous place to be, being a Christian back in those days when we first started off. It's not like that now, unless, of course, you're near any Muslims.
Well, but Edward, I think we're using the term Christian loosely, and we've had some great lengthy conversations about this offline.
Yeah,
And I'm going to make the argument again that a Catholic is not Christian, and that a Catholic is trying to get to heaven through deeds, through buying it, and works, as opposed to salvation. And I think that's something that people don't think about, and you get into that. There's a lot of people who, like I do, you hear them or you see them post about it. I went to mass this morning. I'm doing my thing. I went to confessional on Wednesday. I did my thing, but why? But the Catholics put, why are you going to confess to a man? Or now
yeah.
with this current pope, maybe a woman, or maybe something else, because they've gone so secular, right? I think,
Well, there since and you know what, no one really wants to talk about the first 3 or 4 centuries after Christ's death and what happened in Rome there. We have a lot of Catholics say that Peter was the first pope, and which is not even close to being true. That's almost I don't know how to be diplomatic and use the word fantastical and Fantasyland together, but yeah, that's just not even close to reality. Because actually, the first pope was 595. Pope Gregory, the first one. He was the guy that brought in the purgatory, where we needed money to, you could buy out your relatives if they were Christian but not acting Christian, so you could put them in purgatory to, I guess, burn off some sin for a while, I guess. And if you pray hard enough and send us enough money, you can eventually get them out. That was all his bringing up. That was nobody before that even thought of that. So that was Pope Gregory, the first pope, 595. So when the Catholics would say, and I hear that all the time, no, Peter was the first pope. Oh, wow. How misinformed have they been or taught from these other elders, and amongst other things too. But yeah, there's even more dark history before we even get to that point, which is sorrowful to say. But yeah, I don't know. Booker, you must hear a lot from down there, and Paul, as far as the movement as far as Catholicism? Is it dying off, or is it increasing in numbers? I don't know. I think it's kind of like you said. The people are so disappointed. A lot of them. Well, I've heard of a few converts to Christianity from. Well, when I say that, I mean the Presbyterian free movement away from, and I don't even want to use that word, from that church to where we are today in the freedom movement started by the Presbyterians. Any thoughts?
Are you going, Paul? I
Go
was
ahead,
waiting for
Booker.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to back up real quick to Peter being the first pope. My first wife was Catholic, and I went to Catholic church for about 10 years. I grew up very Protestant, and I am now non-denominational, and I go to a very large, active church in the community, and so that's a little bit of my history. But when I was married, I tried to become Catholic, and they didn't like me coming because I happened to know a little too much about the Bible, and I would ask questions that they didn't want me to ask. They being the priest that taught the RCIA, and one of those questions was exactly that: the first pope. Where do you guys get that? And it came because of Jesus gave Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and that made him
Yeah.
the first pope, and that's where that comes from. And so my question, and I'll never forget it, and it's been a very long time ago. We're going back to 92, 93. So what is that, 30 years ago? I asked the question, if you don't mind me asking, how come Jesus doesn't come back every time a pope dies and give him the keys to the kingdom of heaven? Who on earth has the power to give a man that much power in an organization? And they didn't have that answer. And then I asked questions about Mary. Why are you praying to Mary? It doesn't, there's nowhere in the Bible that it says that. And they gave me good answers. Not good enough that I would actually join the church after going through the process for about 6 months, which actually takes about a year. You can't just go to a Catholic church and say, give me in. But as far as the Catholic Church here, I think, and I do have, I think about my mother-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law now, quite a bit because she was such a devout Catholic. And to me, ultimately, regardless of what you put on the name, whether it's a Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, Catholic, whatever it is, the objective is to have a relationship with God through Jesus. And I don't know that I've ever met anyone that has had a more faithful relationship than she did. And so I happened to see her at my son's wedding probably about a year and a half ago, and I said that to her. I said, I just want you to know that I respect you a lot for your faith, and I think that's really where we need to get to in society and with one another, is get to that common ground on the things that we can agree to, and instead of looking for the differences in each other. And as far as the Catholic Church, and I know that was like a political answer, like I'm a politician, I'll answer it the best I can. I don't see great numbers leaving the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is getting older and older, but that's happening also on the Protestant side as well. If you see it,
Oh
there's
yeah.
now, Edward, you and I were talking the other night. The church that I happen to go to, it's 10,000 members, and it's a vibrant part of the community, and we believe in being the body of Christ, which is the church, and we believe in being the hands and the feet of Jesus to get the work done in the community. And I believe that regardless of what stripes you may put on your shoulder, that is ultimately what we were supposed to do and what we're charged with. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I stand on it.
And
No, no, that's it.
I gotta say, Booker, I think in the last 20 years or so, that kind of non-denominational, here in Texas, we have the Friendship Church, and it's got hundreds of thousands, and they're, in all the major cities in Texas, they, they've got their own traffic police and stuff. There's so many people that attend and that kind of thing. And I think that that kind of look at religion has really resonated with people, as opposed to, a Baptist. I was raised in a Baptist church and or a Catholic church or anything like that. I just think that open acceptance, no matter what, and living and loving God through Jesus has resonated more with folks in the last 20 years or so than the, more rigid, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Catholic, kind of a church.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
lot more legalism. I was raised in a very legalistic denomination of Protestant churches, but I think you also have to be careful that you're still biblical. It has to be a biblical church. It can't just be. My dad used to always say it's a feel good church. I he would say, well, you go to a feel good church, and I'm like, well, if you can't feel good in church for a couple hours on Sunday, where can you feel good? And but you still have to be. I still really believe that you have to be careful I know people kind of pick at Joel Osteen, and I think we're maybe getting off the subject of Catholicism, but I think you do have to be careful. You still have to be biblical. There are some things that need to be said that are uncomfortable for people to hear, and that's an important part of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you know what? That goes back to we were talking about Sean and myself as well, uh, about the legalism that you just brought up, and that's basically where we don't want to be. And we just talked about Islam, well, and Catholic too. They are so law bound, so regimented on that. There is no real teachings on love your neighbor as yourself, because we don't go around killing people because they don't share our same faith. We just don't chop their heads off just because you're not one of us or part of us. Where the extremists definitely will do that. Now, where's the love in all that? Where's the love in all torturing people because you didn't bend the knee to Catholicism instead of, being the Protestant or Protestants that we were? And then the Pope says, yeah, we've made some mistakes in the past. Mistakes? I don't know if that kind of wrong-heartedness would be classified as a mistake, but I don't know what are you going to do with it now, because before Gregory, it was. I shouldn't say that, because there was a couple other emperors that were brutal towards Christians, a few of them really. And then we get to Constantine, and he did legalize it with the exceptions of following it the Roman way, but still the Christian value behind it was still there back then. I'm going to 1200, 1300 AD, or I should say years ago. So it wasn't until we hit, the 595, 600, where it really started getting, bad, because the split happened with the Orthodox, Greek Orthodox broke away from the Roman Catholic, and we have these two separate branches now. And they're still fine. Roman Catholics are still fine. And as the Vision of Daniel, we talked about this a long time ago, the two different legs. I see that's happening, I think, right now. We're seeing that. And I don't know what you've heard as far as the Antichrist coming out of the East, which would be the Greek Orthodox sector. I'm guessing Turkey. I'm guessing Istanbul or Constantinople, if you want to pronounce it, that city, call it that name. But that's supposedly everybody thinking that it's coming from. Anybody have any answers on that or
Well,
thoughts?
actually, I had a couple of questions. So I had a roommate in college, so a gazillion years ago, who converted to Catholicism on one of our couches in a living room. And he was reading every book he could, and he was really he was having a crisis of faith, and he thought Catholicism was the way to go. And I would get a chance to ask him questions. Like, dude's an author now. He's a Catholic minister. I could probably text him, but I would ask him, and I never could understand, why do you pick a patron saint, like a dead human, as opposed to a dead god like Jesus? Why do you use that, or why do you use the rosary, or why Mary, right? Like, I don't quite
Yeah, no,
get
another good one.
what
Yeah.
this is, and why we're putting intervention in between you and God. We're putting a man or a woman, Mary, in between your conversation with God. I don't quite understand that one.
Yeah,
I did get an answer on that made
Oh,
What
I'd
was
sense.
love
the
to
answer?
hear it.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know, and this came from a priest when I was going through that RCIA process, and you know, it's not biblical, but the explanation made sense as to why they do it. And the priest looked at me and said, if you were having a problem with your mother-in-law, you would probably not go to her directly. You'd probably go to your wife and say, your mom, the way she does this, it really bothers me. So that your wife then could go to your mother in law to have a conversation that might be a little bit different than the conversation you would have with her directly. And that's the way the priest answered it to me. And I said, okay, well, that makes sense, but it's not in the Bible.
Right.
And so, but
No,
that's why. And that's one thing about Catholicism, I think that a lot of people misunderstand. It has been an organized religion for a very long time, longer than any,
yeah,
at least here in the Western Hemisphere. Because of
correct.
that, a lot of the things are traditions. And I'll give you another one. An example of that is baptizing children.
Oh,
That's not the
yeah.
way I was raised. I was raised that you got to an age of accountability, and you decide that I want to be baptized, and I
Hmm.
believe in Jesus, and so you repent and confess, and you're baptized, and you confess that Jesus is Lord. And
How
so,
very
but the thing again, going back to the history in the Catholic Church, yeah, it is so old that there was something called the Black Plague at one time. And because of the Black Plague and the difference between my fundamental belief that I'm held accountable for original sin, and they believe that you have the original sin, and that fundamental difference is a huge difference. And because of that, they and everybody was dying during the Black Plague. They started baptizing children because they believed that it wasn't a matter of them being to an age of accountability. It was that they had to be baptized, and so they did it. And one of the problems with the Black Plague was the water, because they used to immerse with baptisto actually means to immerse or immersion, and the Catholic churches used to immerse until that time in history, and they started sprinkling because the water is what could kill you, and that became a tradition. And like so many things in religion, regardless of whether I would say that religion when I was growing up is we sang 2 songs and then we said a prayer and then we sing 2 more and we get up and do an announcement, then we'd sing and then we would have a Lord's Supper. If you rearrange any one of those things, you would have a blue-haired woman in the corner with an elder after church saying we did 3 instead of 2, and that becomes religion. And so the only difference is the religion that I was in the legalistic Protestant church that I was brought up in, it hadn't been around for 2,000 years. It had been around for 150.
right. And that's about where that same lady sat in that same chair for 102 years. And if you ever sat in it
Yeah.
and left her out, the whole place would be in mass confusion because you've somehow switched places. Yeah, I
No,
get that.
Well,
her name was Sarah May. Her name was Sarah May, and she sat on the front row. And if a visitor came and sat in her seat, it was over with. Get up, you're in my seat. And she did it. And her husband was an elder of the church.
I, I just got to comment real quickly because I remember being in youth group, and we'd all, we'd want to be in front of the pastor, but we couldn't sit in hen row.
Yeah.
Is what we called it. The hens, all the
Yeah.
blue-haired ladies that sat straight across the first pew
Mhm.
on the left.
And that becomes tradition. That's what I'm saying. Those things become
Yeah.
tradition in religion, and a lot of the things with the Catholic Church are that way because they've been around for so long. And then but I would say that with the Catholic Church, because my son who's 32, he is Catholic. He went to Catholic school throughout, and he. There's the process of you're baptized as a child, but then you have the first communion, but then you have confirmation, which is about 12, 13, 14 years old, which kind of aligns with when you're to the age of accountability and you make that choice and that decision. And that's the same thing. And the interesting part about my son, when he was going through confirmation in the 8th grade, he quit 2 weeks before confirmation. And then when he got ready to get married a year and a half ago, and he was marrying a Catholic, and they wanted to be married in the church by a priest and have a mass, they couldn't get married unless he went through confirmation. So he had to go through a year of it after going to Catholic school for 9 years, and do the whole process over again. But anyway, that part's very legalistic.
I'm
So
glad the
as an
tradition
aside,
part, is,
I'm sorry, Edward, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No.
I just had a curiosity, Booker, as an aside. wa- Was the Catholic school education a quality education
Yeah, it was. It was a
in
really
your
good
view?
education.
Yeah, good.
And in fact, I coached football there for about 7 or 8 years and basketball.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a private school. I coached middle school football there for about 7 6 7 years, and it is really a good
Nice.
education. And it funneled into 2 different Catholic high schools in that city.
Gotcha.
I'm glad those traditions. I don't know. I'm not one that thinks traditions should supersede anything in the Bible. And this is one of my problems I have with not just Catholicism, but many different branches of what we call religion today, where tradition seems to be most important. And I find it anymore, and I always had this because I too am moved over to the non denominational side because I don't think it should be harder to get into a church than get into heaven.
That's
And
right.
that's how the Baptists have kind of made it seem that way with some of their, and I'm just going to call them ordinances, not really laws, but the traditional way of following, where it's going to be, tougher to get into the church. Being baptized to be a member, I'm thinking, well, isn't that the whole purpose of getting into heaven is to be, the forgiveness of sins, baptism, being a new creation type of thing, and recognize that way. Not the church, but they've got it kind of, I think, a little backwards. So that's the tradition thing that kind of irks me because it should be heaven first and most important relationship, not these ridiculous traditions and laws that we have to follow because that's the whole reason Jesus came beforehand and did give, the leaders, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, good the dickens because, as he said, you've loaded up all these laws upon all these people, and not even willing to lift one finger to help them, just make it more complicated. And here we are, back in the same spot we were 2,500 years ago, almost 2,000, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. You were starting to talk a few minutes ago and gave it back to Edward.
Oh, no. Well, again, just observations, right? So we were talking about now every one of us are likely going to mega churches, and you go, why? Well, because it had all of this stuff, right? Right. Like you could go to chapel, but my kid at 3 years old, I could take her down to, and they would do a short Bible lesson, and then let her climb a rock wall for the 60 minutes that I was in church. And like the teenagers, they had their own building, so they didn't have to be with their stinky adult parents. Like they just had, and it does, these mega churches do, and you wonder, like, when you find out they're all buying basically the same package to preach from. So you could go to mega church 1 and then go to, like, in Indiana, and then go to mega church 2 in North Carolina with mom because it's Easter Sunday, and they're basically on the same programming schedule. It just makes you start to wonder, like, are they now just too commercialized and they're not really following God's plan of teaching? They're just providing you with all this entertainment, the awesome rock band, right? Instead of what I grew up in, which was hymnals, a piano, and a youth group was after service. Youth attended the service.
Well, our
You
church
know,
has all of that. Actually, we just finished building a chapel that seats about 300 people, where there is just piano and hymns. So if that's what you want, that's what's there. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with my mother-in-law being a very devout, faithful Catholic, and that is how she gets to God. That is her relationship with God. And if it takes a rock band, let's get some rock bands. If it takes
Yeah.
a hymnal, let's get some hymnals. Whatever it takes to get there, let's get there, as long as it's in the Bible. If the Bible says it, and our pastor says that all the time, and he's really great. He's a nationwide type of guy where people know him. He preached at the Brooklyn Tabernacle 3 weeks ago, and Jim Cimbala, who has been there for 50 years at Brooklyn Tabernacle, he also comes to our church. He has a house down here in Florida, so when he's here, he visits us, and he preaches, and he's fantastic. But that's one thing our pastor says all the time is, what does the Bible say? And let's go to it. And another thing that at this point of my life that I've done more than anything lately is I pay attention to the red words, those red letters in the Bible. To me, what Jesus said, what he did, and what his example is in the gospel is more important to me than any type of legalistic religion that one may get. But again, that's how I need to have a relationship with God.
No, I agree. Wow. Talk about in our church, and I guess a lot of American influence, because that's who we had basically started too. It's changed a lot, and when you're talking about, gosh, I even forget the word you even use now. You'll have to carry on, Sean. I forgot my words. I forgot it.
No, you've done this with me so many times. Well,
Yeah,
let's get back on your topic, right? Of Catholicism from a Christian point of view. So
yeah.
I already asked my first question, right? We went over the rosary, the using of man, the buying your way in, as opposed to being saved, and then Booker brought up being baptized at an age where you are the one that accepts baptism, as opposed to being sprinkled, right,
That's
or christened, right?
one an interesting point, because even um, Istanbul, Constantine, he was baptized because he was too sick and dying to go anywhere to get baptized. So they just sprinkled water on his head, and supposedly his faith, was enough to, have him baptized. So he did that, and I don't know if it was to just to give back a little bit against the early church or not. But the fact is that they took that from here on in, because if your faith can, have you, go on to the promised land with just that, then I think that's just the way we're going to start doing it. When Booker brought up that the baptism, the early church and the Catholicism did that, yeah, and they changed it, and maybe he was that catalyst where that was what started and changed the whole thing. Well, we'll just sprinkle water, that's good enough. We don't have to do the full body submersion because of faith, and maybe that. But again, we get in the argument against faith and works, working in unison
That's
together.
right.
So
Yeah.
we don't want to go down that road right now. That's a whole 2-hour conversation. But yeah, so baby baptism, the parents were always supposed to be, they sanctified the kids. If both parents were, Christians, the kids were sanctified through the parents. So they didn't have to get baptized till they became adults, which was, Jewish law, 12 years old. So, and then they were not responsible for them legally. So therefore, they got baptized and carried on their own lives. So everybody's saying we have to do baby baptism. What if something happens to that? Well, no, the parents already take care of that because the kids are sanctified through the parents. But people need, we use words today that we don't even use anymore. Sanctification. No one even really knows what that means. It's like precipitation. I can't remember the word now. There's so many we don't even use anymore. No one uses them, so we don't understand them. And sanctification is another one of those words that we don't use. We throw them around every now and again, but I don't think anybody understands them anymore. Being made and doing what your actual purpose is would be sanctified, and being sanctified is what we're all supposed to be when we get baptized, and then follow our God's will. And there's something else that nobody really talks about. What is God's will? Because you hear that a lot. But yeah, that's something too few in the church even discover. And I'm basically pointing to the Islamic and Catholics that they don't really use that. They just go there to do these sacraments, follow the legal bare minimum, maybe go to church during Christmas and Easter. That's my duty. That's all I have to do, and I'm in. But they don't realize if you're not willing to spend 5 minutes a week or a month with your Father down here, what makes you think you're going to want to do it up there? You've totally ignored them down here, but all of a sudden now we're going to have interest, and all this love and warm, fuzzy feelings when we get to heaven. Well, what's the difference between down here and up there? And I think everybody misses that point. If you're not involved or even have any interest in our Father down here, you're certainly not, and it's us that leaves him. It's not him that leaves us. Everybody thinks that the people in hell is because, God has rejected them. No, you have rejected God. You didn't want to follow his ways. You didn't want to follow. You didn't want to even talk to him. That's why you're there, because you left him, and he makes it plain and clear when we actually get there that, hey, you've ignored me all your life. You were opposing me, against me. So, yeah, and that's how it basically is. And no one really wants to confront that and face that. Yeah, we have to be a little more active in our lives. And the way the churches are set up today, it's shameful and not even close to what it was like a long time ago with the early Christians, especially the first 3, 4, 500 years before we even got to the first pope. A lot better then. Now it's just gone into, Martin Luther did a good job. I mean, he did, change a lot of what the church was doing wrong when he nailed that 95-page thesis on the church doors, risking losing his head. Still had the courage to do it, stood on what he thought, the principles that he had, and stood on what was true. And the church did, surrender over a lot of these. Yeah, let's think about this. You're right. We went right off the rails here. And they did change a lot. Of course, he didn't go over child baptism. A lot of things like that he left. He was just, I guess, pleased that he got the majority of what he did through and left the rest till, we talked about the Presbyterian stepping in and Dutch Reform and all the rest of them that stepped in after that, to carry on the church as a stripped down version, bare bones Christianity like the early church. And that's where we have, our, I guess, North American churches today, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, you can go, the United's a whole other story now, isn't it? Wow, that went to the garbage pretty fast, if you ask me. They're even changing the word love because obviously, and no one even knows what that word means today, that's a whole other space itself. You ask anybody their definition of love, they can give you a few attributes from, Corinthians chapter 13, and just, love is patient, love it. But it doesn't tell you what, it's just attributes of the word. What is it? Well, they can't tell you. They don't know. I'm surprised. The whole purpose of the church was to proclaim, preach, walk in that. And yeah, no one even knows what it means. Really, people? I mean, this is it's most shameful. And like I said, that's a whole space to sell, a whole show, isn't it? Going through just what that word actually means, And like I say, it's been a miserable job in the churches. I talked to rabbis, ministers, priests, and it's just slack-jawed, open-jawed, like, don't know, I don't know. No one's, you're kidding? Like, this is the very essence of our lives, our presence, to teach that and instruct, but nobody seems to want to do it, or I don't know what it is. Booker, do you have an answer for that? Do you actually?
I think, again, I like to simplify things, and you mentioned about God's will and what is God's will. I was having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and it dawned on me in a conversation with this person that love means something different to just about anyone. But we all know that whatever that is in our definition, that is something that we want, and it's something that we want to give. And it may be something different. And then I go to God's will, and you look at the Lord's Prayer, and I love that prayer. They asked Jesus, how do you pray? And he says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I spent a lot of time reading that and studying it. And to make it simple, God's will, the way I understand it, is the commandments that Jesus gave us, which is to love God with all of your heart. And just like that, you love each other. And if we were to do that, the next part of that prayer can happen, that we can create heaven on earth. If you can imagine a place where all people loved, and again, you have to define that for yourself, because love is different from one person to the other, but that doesn't matter, because love, no matter how you define it, is something that you want to give and something that you want to receive, and it is cherished. And when we love God with all of our heart and we love each other that way, then it's a different place we're living in.
Yeah. And you know what? you give any sermon on sacrifice or love, you're not going to have a very big filled church that day because no one wants to hear
Yeah.
a minister talking about sacrifice. That's going to be the most unpopular thing to happen. What's love? It consists of a lot of sacrifice, you know. Yeah, no one wants to hear that. That's why it's not so flashy and trashy like pride is, you know, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And look how wonderful I am, what I have. And yeah, that's a lot more, I guess, attractive to follow than the opposite of that being love. Yeah, nobody wants to do that because it just doesn't have anything in it for them. It's all about giving, and yeah, that's so unpopular. Not a very good sermon at all to give.
Yeah. But, here we are at Easter, and you want to talk about love. There's no greater love nor sacrifice than Jesus on the cross. And, a lot of times people forget about the thief, the thief. There's a lot to learn from that guy hanging on a cross next to Jesus. And when it comes to love, because
Yeah,
at some point, he didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of Man and the Savior. But at some point, he realized that he was. And Jesus loved him so much that he took him with him, the thief there on the cross who had not been baptized, but was going to go to heaven. So I don't know. It's a good time to
don't
think
you
about
find
that
that?
thief on the cross.
Yeah, don't you find that kind of odd and strange? This thief on the cross knew absolutely nothing. Can you imagine the guy showing up in heaven and people, well, what are you doing here? Like, what authority do you have to get here? Well, this guy,
Yeah.
said it was okay. What do you mean, this guy?
Yeah.
That guy.
But I think
Yeah, you
that's
know
the
what I mean?
story.
Yeah, I mean,
Edward,
yeah,
that's the story of it. And that's really all it takes. Everything else really beside that is a work. When you talk about sprinkling or immersion or whatever it
yeah,
is, that thief
yeah,
didn't require any of that. He only required accepting Jesus as the Son of God.
yeah.
And with that, Jesus said, "Come with me."
Yeah, I just thought that just that this fascinating. He made that he now maybe he was Jewish. I don't know, but the fact is, he probably wouldn't know very much if he wasn't, Jewish law or did many
Yeah.
sacrifices or whatever, But still, through all that, yeah, if you trust and you believe to me and you believe I am who I am, yep, you're in. I mean, you
That's
don't
simple.
understand the doctrine
That's
of
simple, isn't
you
it?
don't understand. Yeah, I know. There is no doctrine of faith and works or anything that you could possibly understand. It was just like that, and you're in.
Yeah.
I love the story because it's
It's a
so
beautiful
true.
story that we don't tell
Yeah,
enough at this time of year when we're
no,
remembering
no,
Easter.
we don't. And yeah, actually, in like a couple of weeks, we'll be there, or a few, yeah,
Yep.
a couple of weeks.
Well,
Uh-huh.
and
No,
I
it's
always
next week,
tell,
isn't
I
it?
just side note, I always tell people when we get together at Christmas, it's like Easter is the reason we're here.
That's right.
So Christ was born Christmas, but what the work was done was happening at Easter, and that's the reason we're all celebrating Christmas right now. And they'll ask me sometimes, well, what does that mean? And I maybe have an opportunity to explain that and explain what salvation is. And the one that I always stick with, right, is John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, for whoever believeth will have everlasting life. And I get maybe we'll get a chance to have that conversation with people. And again, that's not Catholic. They don't believe. They just walk right over that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I know
as we
down
said,
south, with my southern upbringing, and we've always, you know, everybody puts their good clothes on at Easter and Christmas, if nothing else. And next weekend, I'm looking forward to 5,000 calories a day at both my sister's house, whether I need it or not, because that's a Gant family tradition. There, it's just that. But going to church on Easter and Christmas, even if you weren't every day practicing, those were you didn't miss those days.
So are you gonna make your 30 and 40-year-old kids go look for Easter eggs? Because that would be hilarious,
I
and
am. I
you should live
absolutely
stream
am.
it.
Oh yeah.
That would be awesome. I would totally watch that live stream.
Listen, you're not going to give me grandbabies. You're going to look for Easter eggs.
Yes.
I'll be one of those kids looking for the. I'll be one of those kids looking for the Easter eggs. I'll be there, and I'm more than 40.
Jeez, you guys are killing me. Good times.
Oh my gosh, yes. Hey, going back now, because we didn't even touch on the Islamic movement now, because it is growing, and as I said
That'll be
before,
part
I know
2.
hey, yeah, that might have to be.
We still got 15 minutes left. We can touch on it, and we can warm up.
Like I said, there's a big movement going on right now in the States, and there's a big one going on here in Canada. So, and I don't know why they've chosen to let these countries in, or I should say foreigners in, besides the regulars that we always got. We always got the usual Irish, Scottish, English, Italian, Portuguese. That was, and German. That was our mainstay of immigrants from those countries because, well, they thought a lot like we did. And so they were just easy to assimilate to our culture, our way of being. We all pretty much lived and thought the same, so we just always, immigrated from those countries. Now going to the Islamic movement, the Muslims, yeah, that's a hard fit. It's not going to fit. We all know that. And what are your guys thinking? I guess is probably not so used to the swath of immigrants on that side of things. Would be probably more Mexican, but you're not probably getting many of the East, well, even Asians, let alone East Indians. Paul?
Yeah, but there are some. I have to say there's some similarities between non-radical Islam and Catholicism. I mean, both faiths emphasize oneness. There's one unique God, not a bunch of different gods. They both put great emphasis on the prophets. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. I think Islam also, like Catholicism, values peace, justice, and the well-being of its society. Both have a sacred text, the Bible and the Quran. And whereas, some of the differences, Christians believe Jesus was the Son of God, where Islam believed Jesus was a prophet, but not the divine one, not the divine Son of God, But, there are some similarities between regular moderate Islam and Catholicism, I think.
All right, I'll unmute. I don't know what's going on with Edward. Look, I'm gonna start a Give Send Go, Edward. We're gonna raise $150, and we're gonna buy you a new computer, because that's the price point you need to be in. I don't know why it is that the fan motor on your computer, and
Whistles.
yes, you live like 15 or 16 hours drive from me.
Is that what that is?
I
thought I was going crazy.
You in like 20 minutes, but I know that's not your expertise. You do still trust us. But yeah, I'm going to start a Give Send Go. $150 is the price point. I'm going to get you a laptop.
This is the second time that it's gone through downloads. Right at when we have to go on, it starts doing a download. I have a Flash player I'm downloading right now. It just does it automatically, and something else. So yeah, it's working overtime right now. But
He's got the last working compact.
But you guys stop making fun of my 1994 Commodore. That's not really nice.
Do you play King's Quest on that thing?
Oh my goodness!
Now that I distracted everybody, we gotta fix that, and we will. I'm gonna set the limit at 150. I'm just gonna open up Give Send Go, and we'll get to 150. I guarantee you, we will. We'll send it to you so you can replace it. Like even $150 computer, like a laptop right now, today in 2025, is going to be better than whatever that police siren is going off in the background you got going on.
Like I
I've been over
say,
here trying to play with buttons. I thought maybe it was me. Maybe it was only on my side. I'm
So,
hitting
so the
buttons. I'm
first
like, get
month,
that.
Booker, when we were doing this, that was me. I'm hitting every button on my thing, going, what the heck is this stuff? And because he's like this, his face, he's like not even acknowledging.
yeah, it's the same
Let me
again. Yeah, last
let
time
me
we did this, the same thing happened. More downloads, and I'm thinking, oh, great, right now downloads. I mean, and anytime you put on it, it doesn't matter because it finds something else to download that you weren't even expecting. So here we are back to the same spot. Oh my gosh! But, yeah, but yeah, I'm thinking the fans are probably quieter with the newer ones. I don't know, but yeah, it's not
quieter.
that old of a
I don't
computer,
think they
really.
exist. I don't,
Huh?
I don't even hear anything except for you.
Oh,
Yeah. Let me share with you guys something that I had an epiphany on back months ago, and it was during a sermon. And I've written some articles on the Puritans and their history here in North America. If you don't know, the Puritans came about a decade after the Pilgrims to North America. Their history in England was one where they couldn't worship the way they wanted to, so they went to Holland. It didn't work out there, so they went back to England. Some of them then went to North America following the Pilgrims. Paul Revere's dad was a Puritan. There was Puritans in the Boston Tea Party. The very first person that ever wrote about the abolition of slavery in 1700 was a Puritan. So they were very much a fabric of America. And of course, the Pilgrims' history of religion and Christianity as well. And I was listening to the sermon of Lydia, that story with when Paul came took a trip west. Well, prior to Paul going west, after he had rested some before he took another mission, he was going north. He was going to Asia Minor. And it was the Holy Spirit that came on him and said, "You're not going north. I want you to go west." Paul listened. And that story is so interesting to me because had Paul not listened to God at that moment, had he gone north to Asia Minor, America would never have been America. Canada would never have been Canada as we know it now. And I just thought it was so neat that he goes west, which was actually Ukraine probably. He meets Lydia, and that whole story takes place where they were thrown into jail, and they say prayers and sing hymns, and the stone rolls away, and they get out of prison. And from that, Paul listening to God, America was born thousands of years later. And I think it's awesome.
no, that
Wow.
is a good story. That's a great story. Yeah, wow. Yeah, just by listening. And then we go back to the will of God again, or
Yeah.
having the ear, just having a look around. Yeah, we're back to that being used or sanctified, by our Father. Good for him. Yeah, listening. Something
So,
I don't do very
so
well.
were the were the Puritans, were they the ones that wanted to get back to, a simpler Bible based worship
Absolutely.
other
Yep.
than the Pope and all the
That's
stuff of the
correct.
Church of England and Catholic? And is that
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
understanding?
they would be the Protestants of this country.
Oh,
And and
okay, I
In
got
America, a lot of people called them pilgrims, but pilgrims didn't actually become a term until the mid 1800s. They were the separatists,
Yeah.
and they
Right.
were fleeing religious persecution. And if you remember, every Thanksgiving, Paul, we do a long form explanation of the pilgrims, the separatists, uh, and they're separatists for a reason. But that's the Protestant religion.
yeah.
That's where it is.
Yeah, you want to talk about that stripped down version of it where we get rid of all the, well, the old saying goes, the devil and all his pomp and pageantry. Here we are with a stripped down version of early Christian life where it's more not the four walls that make a church, but the people themselves. As remember Trade Jack, the emperor looking on the Christians, and saying, wow, look at those people. They're all, sharing with their food with one another, looking after each other. They want for nothing and they're a happy people, and jealous and envious of that, and they didn't have any fancy church to go to. It was just a group of people that were like minded and had that heart or spirit, of our Lord. And that's all we basically need now. We don't need all the pomp and pageantry to go with it and be led astray and following different other things besides just, well, what we talked about, just a thief on a cross. How much plainer can you get than that?
Well, and that's what when we were green rooming before waiting on Booker to come in, I was talking to you, Edward. Like there is so many historic Presbyterian or separatist churches in here in North Carolina. Whether I'm in the Piedmont, but whether it's in the Low Country, the High Country, the right, like I'm thinking, I'm just gonna start spending Sundays in the morning and go visit some of these historic 1700, 1600, a couple, 1700 and early 1800 churches that still exist and still do their thing. And I know we were joking. I was like, do I need to get my tri-corner hat? But no, I throw a suit on and go because growing up Baptist, that
Yeah.
very Baptist in the fact that our pastor believed that guitars will lead you to Satan. And then moving into my adult life, where I went to mega churches, like non denominational. Listen, go look at the plaque on the wall. They claim they're non denominational and they'll podcast to you every Sunday morning. Go look at the plaque on the wall. They're Baptist. They're just trying to grow the faith, right?
Well,
I'm
you're the
looking. I'm trying to. I think I probably should just go check out Presbyterian churches, like this historic Presbyterian churches all over North Carolina.
You're in the right area for that. I mean, that
Yeah.
that is the
Oh,
first
absolutely.
13
Yeah.
states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What do you think, Booker? Presbyterian? Should I do a tour of the
Yeah,
Presbyterian
absolutely.
churches?
Do it. Do it. My great grandfather, he was a missionary in Africa from 1888 until about 1912. And my grandmother was born there. He started, the schools and not necessarily hospitals, but a place to take care of people. And he translated the Bible into 6 different African dialects when he was down there. And
Wow.
yeah, that is being the hands and the feet of Jesus. I have a nephew that
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I have a nephew that just spent 2 years in Senegal, in the mission field. He wanted to stay a little bit longer, but he wanted to find a wife, and it's slim pickings there. So he came home and he found a bride, and he's actually a pastor of his first church now, and he got married last year. And it's really about bringing people to that story. I mentioned bringing people to Jesus. I mentioned earlier about the commandments that Jesus gave us, and that was to love God with all of our heart and love each other that same way. But then the other thing he did was he said, "Go tell people about it." And that's what we have to do. And we have to do it by our actions as well. You don't want to thump people over the head with the Bible, but you want people to say, "Hey, I want what you got. Why are you like the way you are?"
Right.
Well, let me tell you. But anyway, we kind of got off track there with the Catholic stuff, didn't we?
It happens. We wander
I know.
sometimes.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, you know what? You make a good point, and you know what? It's all how you leave the people and how you make them feel too. It should be a refreshing load of bricks lifted off once they realize, the facts or the truth of the story. It should make them feel a lot better as well. And I think that is our job, out there in the communities to do just that. That's the helping lending hand I'm thinking.
He
I
muted
agree. Yeah.
himself on the way out.
Yeah.
All right. Fellas, we just hit the 1 hour mark. We're going to close this one out. Hey, listen, I got a couple of quick programming notes coming up. Thank you so much, Booker, for joining us.
Thank you for having
Maybe
me.
look
Great
at you
meeting you, pal.
again sometime. If Edward sets up episode 2 or number 2 of this conversation, I'm totally here for it. So stay tuned with Edward Booker for that.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Paul and I do stuff other days, but hey, real quick. So if you're watching us live, thank you so much for watching us live. For those of you that just listen in your car later on like Spotify, on Amazon or iHeartRadio, this will be up tomorrow. And now that you're hearing this tomorrow, if you want to see us live, the best place is Rumble and YouTube. I'll let everyone say goodbye, and then we'll close it out.
Remember, everyone
All right,
deployed.
gents.
Red.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
I
thank you.
appreciate you. I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Booker.
Thank you,
Nice meeting
Booker.
you.